This is my motovlog for my Denmark trip in the summer of 2024. I was riding my KTM 790 Duke, which has been modified for this long trip. It's kind of like a touring modification, but actually I just mounted a windscreen and some bags at the back of the bike. The first day I rode from Oslo to Kristiansand, which took about 4.5 hours, and then I slept in Kristiansand at a hotel. The next morning I woke up early to go onto the ferry. There were a lot of other bikes that was also on the ferry, and we secured our bikes together. The trip itself on the ferry was pleasant. There were some waves, but I usually just sat in the diner, ate some breakfast, and waited to embark in Denmark. After entering Denmark, the weather was shitty, it was quite rainy, and I put on my raincoat as soon as possible. The first thing I wanted to see in Denmark was Hirtshals Lighthouse, which was a beautiful lighthouse that was open to the public, and you can walk inside, walk up the many stairs, and look at the beautiful view where you can see the small town of Hirtshals.
There were many small bunkers nearby that I could explore, but I didn't really have the time to explore everything I wanted to, so this is one of the places I will definitely go back to when I have the chance. Back on the roads, I noticed that the roads were really straight compared to Norway. But nevertheless, I had a great time riding through all these small towns and look at all the beautiful scenery. There were a lot of windmills nearby, some old ones like this one, but most of them were new and efficient white giant windmills.
Just cruising around the Danish country roads. Fan, jag ser regn.
Being close to the shore, this area in Denmark were really rainy, which meant that I had to take on and off again the raincoat all the time. As I ride through these small towns, I can't help but realizing how beautiful it is, how amazing these small houses are, and how calm the whole situation feels. After just half an hour riding from Hirtshals, I entered a place called Bergs, which had a beautiful lighthouse built in 1899. This lighthouse was actually placed closer to the shore, but due to erosion and much of the sand had been falling into the ocean, the lighthouse was moved 70 meters onto safer grounds. After walking in what feels like a desert, I noticed that I had sand everywhere. So it was nice to get on the bike and try to blow out some of the sand from my riding gears. After Rybergs lighthouse, I drove to a small castle called Rosenborg's Castle. This was beautiful, it was open to the public in the garden, but the inside was closed. As I walked through this beautiful scenery, I couldn't help feeling relaxed. After witnessing this beautiful castle and the garden, I drove further on to a place called Horsens, where I stayed the night. The next morning I set sail to Næstved, which was the next place to stay over. The weather was improving drastically, but still there were some rainy clouds coming in from across the ocean. On the way I visited Odense, which was a beautiful little city, and this is one of my favorite places to stop during this whole trip. The city has small houses like every city in Denmark, but you can see that it's really beautiful and there's a subtle calmness with the whole riding experience. Odense is the birthplace of the famous author Hans Christian Andersen, and here we can see a statue of him. After some sightseeing and a delicious lunch, I was on the road again, and as you can see, I'm riding through this beautiful summer weather. After Odense, I rode to Egeskov Castle, which was more like an amusement park. But there are so many castles in Denmark that you can't actually see them all. But this is one of the most beautiful castles I've ever seen. I bought the entry pass, which I could go inside and explore the whole castle. I could read up on the history and what the castle was used for, both in the early days and now. After Egeskov Castle, I drove to one of my favorite sites on the whole trip, the Store Belts Bridge. This is a suspension bridge and is one of the most iconic bridges in Scandinavia and the north. The bridge itself is 6,800 meters and it took 10 years to build. From this bridge was amazing, but as you can see, there are some really big rain clouds to my right. And just after I finished driving across the bridge, the rain came emerging over me. And I decided that this was a good time to take a lunch. So I drove out of the highway on my first available exit. After entering my Airbnb, I decided to drive to the close town called Næstved. This also had some beautiful ruins that I wanted to explore, and it gave me the opportunity to ride along a small country road in this beautiful sunset. decided to take a small detour on my way to Copenhagen. I heard about this beautiful place that was called Mons Klint, and it was worth taking a small detour to take a look. The Klint is another word for a cliff, and this beautiful cliff is made out of limestone. It is a 128 meter high cliff, and I had to walk down these many stairs to get this beautiful view of it. As it is made out of limestone, ever so slightly, all the time, every day of the year, some sediments of the cliff is falling out into the ocean, which makes that the ocean looks like kind of a muddy texture and color, but it's actually just limestone sediments. It was a 2-hour drive from Mons Klint to Copenhagen, and I decided to take the fastest route during the highway. This is because I wanted to have most time possible in Copenhagen to do some sightseeing. To drive in a big city like this was really different than the cities I visited earlier on this trip, but the GPS made it easy. I wanted to stay at a place close to Nyhavn, which is one of the most beautiful places in Copenhagen, from my opinion. And to see this beautiful harbor is just amazing. In Copenhagen I wanted to see everything, but due to shortage of time I only had the time to see the Rosenborg Castle and the Little Mermaids, Nyhavn, and just do some city walking. Across into Sweden, I drove across the Öresund Bridge. Roads in Sweden started quite similar as the ones in Denmark, but I noticed really quick that there were some big differences when I entered the small country roads. More twists and turns in Sweden. This is the Varberg fortress, which actually had a festival at the time I was there. destination was supposed to be Göteborg, but I decided to stop at some of the castles in Sweden as well, so this is the Tjolöholm castle. Then after a good night's sleep, it was time to ride back to Oslo from Göteborg. Feeling, but as I noticed driving across the country roads in Sweden, the roads were really funny to ride on a motorcycle. It was nothing compared to Denmark, and I enjoyed every second of it. And then comes the time where I'm supposed to cross back into Norway. This is the Elgåfossen, which amazingly is not in Denmark, it is in Sweden, and it's actually the border between Sweden and Norway, as we can see on the flags on this bridge. Kind of weird. After being on the road for a week in Denmark and Sweden, there was something quite special. It was a sense of freedom being back in Norway on the twisty country roads, and I should have done more research beforehand before taking this trip, because the roads in Norway and the roads in Sweden are so much more fun riding on a motorcycle. I am 100% sure that my next trip is going to be these two countries.